Welcome to Ride Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. In the podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. Today, I am joined by an extraordinary guest, Alison Tetrick. Alison is not only a professional cyclist who has made significant marks in both road and gravel racing, but also a passionate advocate for mental health, community engagement, and inclusivity and equity in cycling. Renowned for her resilience and leadership, Alison's journey includes triumphs such as becoming three-time gravel world champion and setting course record at the Unbound gravel race in 2017. Beyond riding bikes, she is deeply involved in initiatives to empower the next generations through cycling. She uses her platform to support mental health awareness, especially focusing on athletes recovering from traumatic brain injuries. Join me in this learning journey as we dive into Alison's impactful story and her purpose-driven riding. But before we get into the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, please remember to subscribe and follow the podcast wherever you listen to. It helps me to grow the podcast, bring you amazing guests, and take you on a learning journey. And if you like what you listen to, leave us a review. Now, back to the podcast. Welcome, Alison, to Ride Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've had some coffee. We're dealing with a little bit of different time zones here.
Yes, yeah. California, London, we are making it work.
We are, for sure.
So, you are on a mission to bring more opportunity, accessibility, representation, and equity into cycling. And you do through cycling as a professional athlete, as a storyteller, as an entrepreneur. I wanted to touch upon the projects that you have been doing to this effect.
Yeah.
But at first,
Go ahead. Yeah. I'm just apparently very awake. Very awake.
That's okay. I wanted to read something that you wrote on social media on the 8th of March, Women's International Day, that I think is quite relevant, and it will help frame as well our conversation on the podcast. So just allow me to read. So it reads like this: every day is our day. It isn't about your appearance or what you already have and will achieve. It's about your love, courage, and audacity to believe and show up. Now, I wanted to, share this here because I think it's quite important and touched upon the mission and the purpose that you have on the work you do. And so I wanted to start the conversation going into the initiatives that you are involved in getting more kids on bikes through NICA, through OutRide, because there is a very purpose-driven mission to all of these initiatives that you are involved in. And I wanted to kind of find out more about what they mean to you and the results of them in the communities that you are working with.
Yeah, it's really important to me to invest in our community and our future leaders. And sports have changed my life. I've been a professional athlete, professional cyclist since 2009. I played tennis in college. Yeah. Sports have always been a part of my life, but they're not everything about me. But sports help fuel that fire to strive for education, making a difference. And when I stepped off of the World Tour stage, you look around and you think, like, what can I do with this platform I've built and these amazing people and community that have supported me throughout my endeavors? And how do I give back and invest in the future? And especially for young women, I want to encourage them to start sports and to stay in sports, because there's such a huge drop off of female athletes around the age of 12 to 14, which you can imagine there's lots of reasons why in that time frame. Not only like hormones, but also injury risk and just like not necessarily equipment or opportunity for them. So for me, it's not about fostering the next generation of professional athletes, but it's just the power of sport. And that's why you and I are talking today. as well, right? It's because we're connected through sport. And how can we invest in our future leaders and keep building a inclusive space and create opportunities for more athletes and, more successful human beings as a whole.
And I mean, of course, you have this platform that you have created through your work, through your experience as a professional athlete, that you have been inspiring next generations because of the importance that you put on inspiring, but also supporting the communities that kind of at a more grassroots level. Perhaps share a bit more about the individual projects that you are involved in. Because I mentioned OutRide, I mentioned as well the National Interscholastic Cycling Association. Yeah.
It's
Can
a
you
mouthful.
Can you just explain a bit more what they mean to you and what impact they are having in the communities that they exist in?
Yeah, I've had an incredible opportunity to race for Specialized the last, 5-6 years. And Specialized is really invested in the OutRide grant and foundation. And OutRide's a very interesting. So I work with 3 organizations, all targeted on getting more kids and then specific programs within that, more girls on bikes. And what's interesting about these 3 organizations, so the one I did not mention is I also work with Little Bellas.
Okay.
We're tackling all sorts of age differences and and across the span here in the United States for these opportunities. What's important though is all of these are centric on racing. NICA, of course, does have is a racing program. It is mountain bike racing for junior high and high schoolers out here, but also it's not. You don't have to be a winner. Like you can go in different categories, and it's really about creating character, inclusivity, equity, and having fun. In your community. And I think that is what these 3 organizations all have in common is it's about fun, community, character, and just becoming stronger in your mind, body, and like soul in a way, and meeting other athletes your age, having mentors and going from there. So OutRide's a really interesting one. It gets over $2 million in funding. And so they start with research to understand the cognitive benefits that cycling has on the brain. And so helping students that suffer from ADHD, maybe lower grades, and there could be there's a school program that they can come in, and that's called Riding for Focus. And I have been a part of that and gone to some of those schools. And it's like a lunch hour class where the bikes, Specialized brings out some bikes and this program, and the kids can go out and ride together, and just to watch their body language of their confidence and get out some of that energy, and then return to the classroom, and then all that research to show like how that benefits their education and their cognitive and social behavior. So they're not, getting suspended as much. They're getting better grades and increasing confidence. So just the power that the bike has on the mind. And I think you and I know that very well, how the bike lets out our crazy every now and then or every day for me. And the one,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then Little Bellas it's a mountain bike organization. It's it's for younger girls, I think around like 7 to 12 years old, but they also have an opportunity for Little Bella graduates that are over the age of 16 to come and mentor the younger riders. And this one's just about to empower women through cycling and like just setting goals, healthy lifestyle. At Sea Otter, I was at Sea Otter this last 2 weeks ago at Sea Otter Classic at Laguna Seca, and the Little Bellas were there. So was OutRide.
Oh, wow.
So was NICA. And the Little Bellas came to the SRAM booth, and we made signs to cheer on our favorite riders. So we had stickers and stamps, and they're riding bikes around and decorating their helmets. And it's a cuteness overload. But just to see this power of community, even at a young age, and to show, young women that sports are for them as well. So that's something that's really important to me too. I played tennis. So tennis is when I was in high school and college. So tennis to me was much more accessible in a way, just because Billie Jean King like paved this way. And then there's so many other sports that are still very behind in creating an equitable place for young women to see them being able to compete or just play on their bikes or whatever they want to do. So it's centered around like in creating like a female camaraderie. So through mentorship, and I think all of these programs, that mentorship is huge. And with NICA, one of my personal favorite parts of it is it has this program called GRIT, and it stands for Girls Riding Together. And so I've attended some GRIT camps where they're out there camping here in Petaluma, California, where I live, on a ranch. They're riding mountain bikes, they're doing arts and crafts, they're sitting around a campfire, and just making a really safe place for young women to find sports and friends and community, and encourage them, to keep pursuing that throughout their life.
Yeah, it's very, very important to create a safe space where young girls, young adults can interact, can gain some life skills, grow, and just be able to go out in the world with more confidence, with new skills. And cycling does give them that, because there's so many metaphors that cycling gives us, but not just metaphors, there's actual actionable advice that you can learn through riding a bike. And also to the fact that riding a bike, you are giving the freedom, you are empowering children, because they can then get from A to B, they can become a bit more independent, they can start navigating through the obstacles that they face, whether they are on the trails or on the gravel path. But then they can apply those lessons that they learn through the camps that you mentioned, through the activities, and apply them later on in life as they grow up as well. And kind of what I'm interested in finding out about the community side. You have very actively been involved in building this community, and also at large in the cycling world. I mean, can you share a bit more about how you foster these communities that you work with, but also the people that, for instance, know about you or follow you on social media, and then are inspired about your role as an entrepreneur, but also as a professional cyclist? Is there a way that you find of inspiring and nurturing these communities that you are touching in different areas?
I think it starts with what you read on my Instagram at the beginning of this show. Was something really important to me is showing up. And I didn't realize that till later in my career. So, a lot of times people ask you, what would you tell your younger self, and I look back and I spent, the beginning of my professional cycling career, like scared, and scared to be me, trying to fit in, and then of course scared of the skills I was lacking and, some bad crashes, which I'm sure we'll tap into. But
Yeah.
Cultivating this community is like showing up and being authentically you. And I think even when I was racing World Tour, I loved getting solo breaks or, getting in breaks and just trying really hard. And so it wasn't always about the result. It's about, weaving and navigating the story of our journey we're going through on the roads, races, and life, and being authentically you, and also allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And it doesn't always have to be like rainbows and butterflies on the internet, right? It can also be a little dark and hard, and life can be hard, but it's a beautiful thing that we have in this life. So I think just showing up for my community like they've showed up for me day after day is cultivating something really powerful, where they're inspired to keep investing, in their own health and well-being, as well as the future, like getting more kids and girls on bikes. And I'm so impressed with them, and they give me so much power to be me. So I always like to say be bold, because it's probably something I have to remind myself to do a lot. But it's, to me, is just like something about being bold is showing up where it can be really terrifying to show up, because so many times in cycling we glorify the finish line where there's a winner and there's champagne, and but there's so scary just to show up sometimes, like show up to be like just you. And so start lines, and I say that too, is like start lines are more scary, like they should be more glorified than finish lines sometimes, because like you got to show up for people and let them know that they're not alone and that there's a place for them. And so I think that's just a really important part of community cultivation.
Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. I mean, not only the fact that you also need to get yourself to the start line, but we also need to think about the barriers that exist before you even get to the start line, and that's the barriers faced by women to get there, to get to the start line. And that sometimes is the way the sport is represented, the majority of how the representation of the sport is portrayed in the media. And I think that your role has been pivotal in kind of broadening the scope of what it means to be a cyclist, what it means to ride a bike. And I think that's an important perspective to have, because people that not necessarily have the means or not necessarily have the structure, you, through the work that you are doing, are creating that platform. And the message that you're putting out there also represents an opportunity for people to engage and see, oh, wait, there is a different side that, the media perhaps is not representing. And I think that you said about, it's kind of the community that you're growing is both help each other, I guess. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way you said it, it feels like you both are helping each other and growing mutually. You are giving back, and then the community gives back because they resonate with what you're saying, the message you're putting out there to inspire, to empower young girls, women out there to take up to the sport, but in many shapes. It doesn't have to be gravel riding or mountain biking or road cycling. It can be wherever how they want to express themselves.
Yeah, I think you're right there. That is really important because we've also grown up together. This is how life goes. You evolve through life, and so going from being a professional, seriously professional road cyclist at world tour level to then winning gravel races, and we grew up together, and there's just so much opportunity to as our relationship with the bike changes and we evolve. It is just such a balance of what you give to your community, they also will give it back, and it's incredibly humbling to me, and it's very special that the power that the bike lends for that.
Yeah. And is there any perhaps particular story that sticks in your mind of a person that has resonated with your story, with the purpose that you have, and felt inspired to do the same and communicated that with you? Is there something that you see when you are going to events like, for instance, the Sea Otter Classic?
Oh, I have so many stories, and you would make me cry if I told all of them. Okay. There's so many amazing connections you make on the bike, and it's so meaningful when somebody comes up and shares a story. Do you remember when you said this? And then I went and signed up for my first gravel race, or my daughter has the signed card you gave her up on her wall, over our family photo,
Yeah.
and for instance, there's this a young woman. She's probably 9 years old, and she's gone to several sea otters with this Little Bellas program, and for her to come back year after year and remember me and tell me her stories and say what her goals are, and just her excitement and just joy and zest for life, and telling me she's going to go win her bike race. And she said to me that she felt like she was cheating because she was only, I don't know, I think it was 8 or 9. It was this year. I should know her age. And she's racing against the 10-year-olds. So she's like, I'm younger than them, so I feel like I'm cheating. But just the power that the bike gave her, and just to watch that as years go by and she grows up, is really inspiring. And then also there's several individuals I've met throughout the gravel scene who sign up for their first century, who are coming back from a traumatic brain injury, who buy their first gravel bike, and then just watching them sign up from the 50, and the next year I show up, they're doing the 100, then they're doing the 200, and they're getting healthier, they're finding goals, they're being resilient through all those obstacles that the bike and life can often hand. So there's some really special people out there, and so keep the stories coming in. I'll probably cry.
I mean, when you put such a purposeful message out there and you share that story that you have been on, that journey I've been on, it's natural that people want to come to you and tell you about, this is how you inspire me. It reminds me of, as a young kid having posters of athletes on the bedroom wall, and then that's perhaps, what young children are doing now, like having posters of you perhaps on the bedroom walls, and looking up to, this is someone that inspires me, that I see as a role model. So yeah, it goes to show that being able to, like you said, being authentic, in a good way. I mean, let's not get into the authenticity debate, but being authentic in a good way helps to kind of move the needle into help for better representation, equity in the sport, and aligning with the mission you are doing. And I wanted to touch, because you mentioned several things that's a lot to unpack in what you've said. This is like the mental health aspect of it, but also the representation opportunities for women in cycling. And I want to start first on that, the later. So I wanted to kind of have your perspective on what are the opportunities now, for both as a recreational activity, as a competitive activity. From your experience, what has been the differences from when you started to where you are now?
I think there's been huge growth in women's cycling. Yes, from the grassroots level, these organizations we already touched on that really are focused on getting that 50%, level of participants at the younger ages and keeping them in that sport. And then, I think gravel's been huge, just because it tends to be a little more inclusive, different distances. Those are trending much to like 50% female, and this is from amateur to professional athletes. And that's been a huge change. That shift was happening around 2017 or so, 16, 17. And then on the women's side, the professional side, I mean, that's just been incredible, where now you're seeing a minimum wage on the World Tour. Their teams are offering maternity leave. So we're watching a lot of these professional athletes come back after having a child and being just as successful, if not more. But teams providing that resource is a great way to keep women in sport. And so I think the trend is that women's sports in general, not just cycling, are having a moment, and it's something that's been deserved for quite some time. But to celebrate that moment and to capitalize on it, where I cover the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift on the move. And I know you had Kate on the show, and Kate and I work closely together with our whole Watch the Femme campaign there at Zwift. And so you're looking at companies like Zwift that are investing in women's cycling and getting an ROI. Then you can look over what's going on in, NCAA basketball over here. You got these athletes signing like crazy deals, and Demi Vollering the other day signed a personal deal with Nike. This is a huge trajectory that we're seeing in this. And I think what's happening is before people said, well, no one wants to watch women's cycling. And maybe they said that about tennis, but then, they started the Virginia Slims tour, and turns out people did want to watch women's tennis. And then it's just, if not more valuable than men's tennis at this moment. Yeah. And that's not because they're not both incredible sports to watch. It's just some of those stars on the women's side have very compelling stories that have a lot of fans.
Exactly.
So I think it's about this whole, which we were talking about it, where sponsors were going, oh, well, I don't want to invest all this money if we can't watch the sport. And also then we're not going to get the younger generations or even an adult that just wants to take up cycling and sign up for her first event. If she can't watch it and know that she's not alone out there, or there's more people like her, and it goes into this concept of visibility is viability. So if we can't watch the sport and you can't see it, then this younger generation doesn't see them being able to do that in the future. And that still goes to a local woman at your club, that if she doesn't see that she can go out and conquer this, and she feels that there's a barrier to entry, she's going to pick up pickleball. I don't know. Pickleball is pretty fun though.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's so important to have the representation in the media, to have investment from brands, because that also helps cycling be seen by a wider audience and not just the people that are really keen on it. So that opens up the doors to new audiences, to new people coming into the sport. I'm interested by something you said earlier on about the gravel scene. You almost have a 50-50 split between men and women. I wanted to have your take on it, on my question, which is, do you think that in comparison to other disciplines such as mountain biking or road cycling, do you think that gravel has created better infrastructure or has created the right blueprint to have equality as a sport?
I think it's a little different of a platform because often it's mass starts, which now as gravel's becoming, with UCI Gravel Worlds for a couple years now, I mean, there is definitely a pro level of gravel that didn't exist, which I think is amazing. I think there's always a place for people on bikes, and there's always a place for grassroots mass starts. I always say, like, if you're riding a bike, you're doing it right. Like, just like so much in cycling, we get like stuck on like how you should look, what you should wear, and just pedal. So, I mean, there was some concerns, on gravel that with the UCI coming in, this world tour, world championships and these qualifiers, that was going to take away this illustrious spirit of gravel. And, that lives on. And I think what the platform offers is the mass starts, and the finish lines are so much more similar to a marathon or an Ironman, where everyone's tackling the same course and you're bringing this community together, and you get thousands of people, and usually small towns because that's where dirt roads are. And so it impacts the community. You've got, signs out there on the courses, and I won Unbound, and it was my first gravel race in 2017. And I was racing on the world tour at that point, but I wanted to do this crazy 206-mile gravel race that I'd heard about. And my team told me I was crazy, and they let me do it, but then made me do every like Belgian race that I hated in order to do it. Just kidding. No, I'm not. So I come and do this race, and it was so fun because when you're racing, like, racing can be really intimidating. And if anyone that's listening that has done, like, we have a lot of criteriums in the US, and you get dropped in a criterium and you're like riding around city blocks and all your friends just like rode away from you. And it's like very lonely. It can be very devastating. And gravel, like, you're just never really alone. Like, there's just people everywhere. And I think that lowers that like fear of failing, because at the end of the day, whether you finish at 6 p.m. or 2 a.m., like, we're all there, covered the same course, and you can kind of share your war stories of the day. And so I think it brings people in, like, the professionals off a pedestal and puts them into the community. And the community like doesn't need the professionals there to have fun either, right? It's just about tackling a course. And so I think that's why gravel's a little different than a traditional road race, where you sign up in your age group, you start in these little like waves, and I don't know, a lot of wave starts now in gravel, which is good for safety. So I'm not saying no wave starts or no pro racing, but I do think it offers, like, you've done a marathon, or I've never done a marathon, but I've seen them, and it looks like people are just conquering that course. Like, they're smiling.
Exactly. Yeah. I haven't done a gravel race yet, but I do see I see how it is organized, what the facilities are, how the logistics of it work, and also the fact that society has evolved significantly in terms of equity. Is not there yet, but is moving the right strides, I believe. And so there is a new understanding that the equity and the right logistics, how it's organized, so that women, men, however you identify yourself, can come to that event and feel welcomed and take part and feel included in the fun that it is and the adventure that it represents for people. So I think that's a key point about that differentiates perhaps gravel events from other events. But that I might be making a huge mistake here, but that's my take.
Yes, I think you're right there, which means you need to sign up for a gravel race.
Exactly, yes. You also touch upon an aspect of mental health awareness. And this is something that is very personal to you, because So you suffered a traumatic brain injury, and I wanted to touch on that because I think it connects to the purpose you have in and the mission you have in kind of the accessibility and the opportunity in the sport of cycling. And I wanted to kind of understand how the role of mental health and your experience through this injury has helped you to perhaps see how the role of mental health in helping young adults, young women coming into the sport, right, and feel more included.
Yeah, I think I suffered a traumatic brain injury and then subsequent concussions. I actually still kind of dealing with one right now, which is just a daily life. And
Okay.
so I got life flighted out of a professional bike race in 2010, and I broke my pelvis and was not in a good spot there. Broke a lot of things, I'm sure, but pelvis was a big one, and my brain, of course, wasn't great. And I came back actually pretty fast because I got very fixated on watching this bone, heal. And this was a little bit before people took TBIs that seriously. They hand you a sheet at the hospital that says like you might have a concussion, like when you like are getting wheelchaired out. And so the effects of that stayed around for a long time. And I got a subsequent concussion at 2011 Pan American Games, and then it was pretty much lights out. And I went through a really hard time emotionally, personally, professionally during that time. A lot of it because I don't think my brain had healed, and I was dealing with a lot of mental health issues, depression, anxiety, some PTSD with like panic attacks while racing. And during that time, I realized that I had not taken care of my mental health or my brain's health, basically, because I was so trying to come back, qualify for the Olympics, and I just wanted to race my bike. And I put a lot of things on the back burner during that time because I just had this laser focus for this one goal. And then at Pan American Games, that happens. And then instead of qualifying for the Olympics, the next year I'm relearning how to read. And,
wow, that's quite a jump.
And taking, and once I came back to racing, I was pretty angry at the bike, and I was angry. Maybe I was feeling sorry for myself and it turned into anger, but I just felt like, I don't know, that the bike took something from me and it owed me something back. And you're lining up for starts of races and, taking antidepressants while racing, which it can affect your performance and it helps you with the lows, but also takes away the highs. And so it's something I've dealt with, my whole career, especially since all these injuries, and traumatic brain injuries and concussions, post-concussive syndrome. I mean, that can take years or the rest of your life to recover from. So when people ask me, how's your recovery going? I'm like, what day is it? We'll check in, because every day is different, and mental health is like that. I mean, there's highs and lows and a lot of just in the middle. And it's really important to talk about that. And when I was racing at that level, like people weren't talking about it. And you don't want to show weakness to your competitors or your team manager.
Of course,
Like, you don't want to be like, I'm sad today. You want to be like, I'm fierce and strong, but really inside you're just like a crumpled like puddle. And I think it's okay to be both fierce and strong and a crumpled puddle. Like, and that happens even if you're not clinically diagnosed with something. That's just mental health. And so I think if people talk about that, we always pretend to be with this like false bravado of doing that. Like what I'm saying, like be bold, like show up, race hard. Cyclists love to say suffer, and I always like suffer, sacrifice. And I'm like, what about like just having fun or like being healthy? So it's something like, it's really important to me because I felt really alone during that time. And especially performing at a high level as an athlete, and this could go, like you're saying, in business or anything. Like it's hard as a woman. Hormones are different. There's not enough studies on that. And I felt very alone. And it was when I worked with a neuropsychologist that I still work with today. That's was very helpful at the time. And with my latest injury, I went back to work with them again. But I actually went to grad school. So I got my master's. I signed up for a PhD program to learn more about neuropsychology, which was a very expensive way to relearn how to read. But during this time, I really want to, so I did this PhD program and ended up with a master's so I could go race in Europe again. But during this time, what I did learn, why it's important for me to bring this on my platforms, is because I felt alone, and I had my whole identity was a cyclist, and it took this huge injury that like almost killed me. And then it took me several years after that to realize that the bike had saved me, but I needed to change my relationship with the bike and that identity. And cycling tends to get a lot of type A individuals, that are very into metrics and numbers. And so you're like a cyclist, but like you're so much more, and like your health matters, and it's okay to be like, show that vulnerability, show some weakness. Like you don't always
Exactly,
have
yeah.
to be perfect. And I think that's what makes
Exactly,
us
yeah.
like imperfectly beautiful.
Very well said. I think there is something that you touched upon about, which is riding a bike doesn't have to be about suffering. It's not about suffering. You can make it wherever you want to be. And there's something that you mentioned in a previous interview, which is happy cyclists or happy athletes are so much better at performing than athletes that frame their performance just by how much they are suffering, how much they are sacrificing. And kind of you seem like you have sort of pivoted and turned that upside down, and now you see it. No, this is not what that means to me. It meant that perhaps a few years ago, but now it's about the enjoyment that it brings me and focusing on that. So it's like a mindset shift in how you see the sport, how you see yourself interacting with your bike. I mean, which correct me if I'm wrong, but the bike is very much kind of a very intrinsic part of your life because it gives you joy. It's something that you love very much. Is that true?
It's very true. I like to say the bike is my expression, and I like expressing myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's also the aspect of how the sport is portrayed in the media, and that's perhaps a role that you have advocating for change through the work at grassroots level, but it's something that perhaps brands need to start doing differently, because cycling can take many shapes. It's not about, if we're thinking about mountain biking, it's not about just doing massive jumps, or if we're thinking about gravel, it's not about who can compete the longest distance in the fastest time. Or if you're talking about road cycling, it's not about climbing a huge climb in the Alps somewhere in Europe in the shortest possible time. So that's just a very narrow representation of what the disciplines can be. And what you're doing is widen that and say, like, hold on, it's more than that. This is one way of looking at it, but there's also many other ways. So I think it's important to reflect on that sport is fun, represents adventure, represents freedom. And when you're working with young children, young adults, that's the motivation for them, I believe. It's like it gives them the freedom and then gives them the skills, the tools to grow up and empower them, be better humans, perhaps. I think that's the better objective at helping younger generations to get into the sport and enjoy riding in a purposeful way.
Yeah. Get on a bike, ride it, stay in sports too. I mean, there's so many stats on, just being in sports for longer and how that makes your career look later too, on a professional level, especially females. Like if you're doing sports in college, the likelihood that you're going to be an executive at a company like increases dramatically. It's just, it's teaching time management. There's still that joy of freedom, but there's also, dedication, determination, some grit and resilience in there. And shoot, it's so fun, right? And it's healthy.
Yeah, of course.
Healthy until you get life lighted out, but we'll keep that one out.
There's always different ways of doing the sport. As you said, the bike almost killed you, but at the same time saved you. So sometimes you have to take the negatives with the positives. I wanted to reflect on kind of your experience. What advice do you have for people looking for cycling to sport, to the bike, to inspire other people, how they can start on their journey? like you have.
Yeah, I mean, cycling is a beautiful sport. It's Bikes can get expensive, as we all know, but it's also a sport
Yes.
that, so many people do. There's those articles that cycling's the new golf. So, I mean, if you're looking for,
Yeah.
networking opportunities, the bike does offer, like, for a business owner, entrepreneur, like, the
Hmm.
bike can offer like incredible opportunities to meet like-minded people that perhaps you want to work with or promote change or work in advocacy. So meeting your community on a bike is pretty easy because there's clubs and rides and events you can attend and meet those like-minded people that can help you pursue, like,
Hmm.
ultimately probably a similar goal, which is creating that change that you're talking about. And, so you're doing this here, you're creating a platform, doing a podcast. I'm
Yeah.
sure, you enjoy riding your bike, you have friends with that. So,
Of course. Yeah.
yeah. And then working, if you could start locally and work on advocacy for better bike paths or trails, in your community, you can help with events. The bike's also really great for charitable organizations doing charity ride. And that's what's cool when you're talking about sponsors, using the sponsors that aren't in the sport, so non-endemic sponsors, but on a sports marketing side, how many thousands of people a bike event can bring to that area and make a big difference. And so, but as you individually, I think we've kind of covered it. It has to just be you, like, find out what your purpose is, what
Yeah.
makes you get up in the morning besides just riding your bike, and what difference you want to do with that, and be you, and share that story, and give back to your community, and find the community that best suits you too. Like, they're all over there, all over the place. Um, I love it when you find you show up at an event or a bike ride and you're like, these are my people. Like, this is great. And you might not even know anyone there, but that's just something feels right. So I think it's about putting
Yeah.
yourself out there and helping lower that barrier to entry. Like, if somebody's wearing their glasses on the wrong side of their helmet, maybe don't correct them.
Yeah. There's enough judgment in the world that ruins something that we all share. Well, people listening to this podcast will share the love for riding bikes, and also the joy that inspirational stories come from riding bikes, because bike is an amazing tool that take you places, and I think from my experience has transformed my life, and I'm sure it has transformed many other lives. And from what you have been sharing today, also has transformed your life. So yeah, it's like, as you said, I think looking to the people around you to see what impact can you make with those people, and start small and then grow from there, perhaps.
Yeah.
Mm. So I wanted to. There's a question that I wanted to ask. It's kind of topical of the podcast, and I think perhaps we'll reflect about the purpose you have, which is, what does success look like to you?
Success to me is having a purpose and making a difference.
There's a lot that means, but when you boil it down, it's reflecting about what difference can you make, whether sharing a ride with someone else, or amplifying someone else's voice, or organizing a group ride. There's so many ways, and that impact is crucial because it gives you purpose, and it creates a ripple effect on the world. So it's very important.
Yeah, and I think you need to be excited about what you're doing, and you might not always feel like you're adding value or having purpose every day, right? Because we have lower points, but knowing what that, what your gold star is, like what you're shining towards is, and what that purpose is. And then even if one day you just need to be quiet and stare at a wall and you're not feeling like you're making forward progress that day, that's okay, because you're taking care of yourself, that could be a good purpose too. But I just don't want to feel that I went through all this. I've dedicated so much of my life to a sport and a career. I work a lot off the bike, but I want to know that I added value and made a difference. So that would be success. And I felt love, and I loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's precisely where the trajectory you are in. So yeah, it's kind of very well sums up the trajectory you are on. I wanted to ask you a question that was left from the previous guest. So this is a tradition I started on the podcast, where every guest leaves a question to my next guest. And so the question that was left for you is this: what is it called for now?
What is it called for now?
Yeah. So this is a meditative question.
Forward progress.
Forward progress. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
It was a mantra that Celine Yeager, you should get her on the show, gave me for my first gravel race. It was forward progress, take care of yourself. And oftentimes, and this, she was using it in the racing context, because you might have a flat, you might be walking up a hill, you might be cramping, but are you moving forward? Like, are you doing things to get yourself to move forward? And then take care of yourself is, eating, fueling, drinking, but also it was talk nicely to yourself, do positive affirmations, and so then I took that into my personal life and professional life is forward progress. Like, am I answering those emails? Am I keep moving the ball? I don't want to be stagnant. So what is it called now is I don't want to be stagnant and I want to be making forward progress. Then when you add the take care of yourself part of that, like I said, if you are having a down day and you just want to stare at a wall, that is forward progress and taking care of yourself, because that's what your body needs at that moment. And so that's very hard for me to learn. So it's something I'm reminded now, coming back from this, a lot of broken bones and injuries I had this last year, from a horrible thing. And to think about that forward progress each day. And sometimes it's a couple steps backwards, but if you're taking care of yourself along the way, ultimately you are moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And you have the purpose, but you also have the understanding that it kind of flows. So knowing that where you're going already allows you to perhaps be moving forward. I think that correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my interpretation of what you just said.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay.
I mean, it ties in everything that, we've talked about on, increasing inclusivity and equity and opportunity, forward progress, and, taking care of yourself. And then, if you have the ability, taking care of others along the way too is really important.
Brilliant.
That is successful.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very well said. Very well said. So I guess now is the time for you to put someone else on the spot. What question would you like to leave to my next guest?
Since I just answered a meditative question with a mantra, my question is there a special or particular mantra that you have used during a tough time, whether on the bike or in your personal life?
Brilliant question. Very good question. Alison, it's been brilliant getting to know you and having a bit more insight into what drives you and the purpose and what success looks like to you. So, and I hope that people will be kind of called to action to follow up on what the work you have been doing and getting to know you a bit more if they don't already. So where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Tetrick, so at AMTETRICK, and that should lead you to all my places. I'm on X, Instagram, Facebook. Also, if you are interested in donating to our cause, my husband and I have Saga Ventures, and we sell bandanas and soon other projects to get more kids and girls on bikes, or just hit me up on the DMs on the socials.
Brilliant.
Kind of like you did, Pedro. You just showed up, I answered. So, hey, there's proof.
That is true. Yeah, very good. Brilliant. Thanks for your time, Alison.
Thank you so much.
What a great conversation with Alison. Her journey is a powerful reminder of the transformative potential of cycling, not just as a physical activity, but as a vehicle for broader social change. Her story really resonated with me, and I hope it resonated with you as well. And if you listen this far into the podcast, please leave us a review. A 5-star would be amazing. I'll be forever grateful. And will help me to bring more amazing guests for you to come on a learning journey with me. Now, before we go, please remember to tune in to next week's podcast, where Alison's question will be answered by my next guest. Until then, thanks for listening.